Again, welcome to tonight's Educate to Elevate. Our E2E series is when we take a topic that can be applied across any sport, coach of any level, and really dive into something that is applicable in real time. So setting the tone, being able to start your year off right. We're excited about this one. A little bit of a change up or some pinch hitters, if you will. The panel's going to look a little different maybe than what you're expecting, but I promise it's going to be great. So we will go ahead and I will introduce the panelists, and I'll let them take just 60 seconds or so to tell you a little bit about themselves in case you're not familiar with them. And then just one housekeeping thing to start. Brandy Stewart, who is one of our administrative voices on the call, she will be on a little bit shorter than others. So we're going to front load some administrative questions. So if you've got some good ones, get those in the chat early so we can make sure that Brandy gets those. And we will get rolling with this one. So I'm just going to go in screen order. Chrissy, you are the first one on my screen. If you want to just unmute and just tell everybody a little bit about your background in coaching, what you're doing now.
Yeah, hi, I'm Chrissy Schoonmaker. I'm the head coach at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. I'm heading into year 3 with our group. This is my first head coaching gig. I've been a long-time assistant for about 12-15 years, and now I'm the leader of the program at GW. We won the regular season championship in 2022 and looking to build upon that success as we move forward, but thrilled to be here. Thanks for the opportunity, and whoever's up next, pop in.
Absolutely. Brandy, you're next on my screen. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. So sorry to have to dip out on y'all early. I have a little 6-year-old that needs to get to bed, or neither of us is going to have a good morning tomorrow. I'm Brandy Stewart. I'm currently serving as the Deputy Athletic Director, one of our Deputy ADs at Penn State. I've been here for about 5.5 months, 6 months or so, and have been at multiple institutions. Prior to that, I've worked at Florida State, Alabama, Texas Tech, UCF, and now here. But I'm also a former softball player and had a 2-week stint as a coach at Texas Tech. But I'm happy to be here, happy to answer any questions that you have. Joanna and I go way, way, way back to our Seminole days. So happy to help her and happy to be here for y'all and provide any advice or lend an ear or a voice for whatever you might need. Thanks for having me.
Love it. And Brandy was a multiple All-American at Florida State. She left that part out, but I'll fill it in. And she has like 30 minutes notice on this call. So I'm just pumped to have her with us and joining in. Mickey Dean, you are up next. Go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Mickey Dean, I'm the head coach at Auburn. I've been here about 6 years. I've been lucky enough to coach internationally, professionally, and collegiately. So I've really enjoyed that. It's been a great journey.
Thank you very much, Coach. Coach Huntington, you're up next.
Yeah, hi, Leslie Huntington. I'm the head coach at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. Going into my 27th season of college coaching overall, and my 23rd at UW-Eau Claire. And in addition to coaching college softball, I have trained under Brian Kane as a mental performance coach. So I think a lot of people are familiar with Brian, and have had the pleasure of being able to absorb all that is Brian Kane and apply that to my coaching life on a pretty much daily basis. So excited to be here as a pinch hitter. Yeah, all right.
Thank you very much. We have Samantha Ekstrand on the call too. Sam, I won't make you go into this yet, but Sam will be available for all of your questions. She is driving, but she will not be on camera, but will be able to jump in. We have one question that came in the registration form more than any other, and this is pretty common question-wise, and it's about team captains. So I'm going to let all of you answer this because I think everybody does it differently, and I think people even do it differently year to year. So we're going to go backwards. Leslie, if you would start us off, do you use captains? How do you decide, and what do you see the role of your captain or leadership structure being?
Yeah, so and interestingly, my assistant coach is on the call tonight too. So so this is for me a lot of repetition for her. We use a system, and we actually call our team leaders squad leaders. And it kind of comes from a little bit of, I believe, like Navy SEALs training. They have squads and that type of thing, but we use squad leaders. And they're appointed. There's a couple of ways that we determine who our squad leaders are going to be. And one is I have conversations with the players on the team about who they see as someone that they want to lead them. And then I kind of keep track of the names that are pretty consistently brought up. And then once I have, and it depends on the size of our team, how many squad leaders we will have. This year we have 4. We have a large team this year, so 4 is a really appropriate number, I think. So I get feedback from the team. And then based on those names that have come up the most often, that's where the coach's discretion comes in making the final decisions on who those squad leaders are. And my single biggest criteria in them being squad leaders is that they have to be able to lead themselves well first. And we talk about doing that in the classroom, in the weight room, in the community, on the softball field, in every aspect, and what leading themselves well looks like. And then once we have our squad leaders in place, we divide the rest of the team up so that we have so for example, again, we have 4 squad leaders this year. We divide the rest of our team up so we have 4 squads. And then what it does is it allows me as the head coach to just have a little bit more streamlined communication process to the team, because the squad leaders are now in charge of their squad. So if somebody on their squad is showing up late to lifting or different things like that, yes, it's their responsibility to make sure they're still on time and doing the things that are expected. But now the squad leader is the one who is responsible for the players in their own squad. The other thing that really, and one of the things that really helps with, is kind of delegation of responsibilities. So for example, we have a system in place where we need to put some water on our field every day that we have practice before they drag it. And so, we may have one squad do it on one day, another squad do it on another day. And so it just really helps with efficiency, communication. And then our squad leaders they take a ton of pride in leading their own kind of micro team within our team. So that has worked really well for us. We've used it several years. Actually, for a couple of years that we didn't have squad leaders, we regretted it. So we went back to it very, very quickly. And it's a system that's worked really well for us.
Thank you, Coach. Mickey, how about you? What do you guys do?
All right. Well, we do team leaders. So, and the way we do it, we break it down by class. So we have each class select someone that they feel represents their class. And then out of that, depending on the size, we'll also do 2 team captains. So we'll have 2 team captains and then a class leader for each class. That way we feel that each class has someone that they can go to, because it's really tough sometimes for freshmen and sophomores to initially build that relationship with the juniors and seniors. So it gives them an opportunity to have that relationship and be able to have a voice. And then that team leader, of course, becomes their voice in our meetings. So that's how we do it.
Thank you. Brandy, I'm going to kind of give you 2. You can go whatever way you want with this, but I always find it interesting. I hear coaches now more than ever say they're lacking leadership. So I'd love to hear your ideas on what role that you think the coach plays in developing the leadership on their team. And then also, if you've seen a creative structure in any of the sports that you supervise, if you'd share that a little bit.
Yeah, so I really do, as a sport administrator and a former student athlete, I think that there's a lot of value in providing leadership opportunities for the people that are on your teams, and whatever that might look like. I think that, it's not a one size fits all situation, but I'm assuming most of you have student athlete advisory councils or committees or boards or whatever on your campus. So having some people that might be able to serve in that capacity. Those might not be the same people that are your team captains, right? Like people might have different opportunities to serve and represent your program in different ways. I've seen team captains handled a lot of different ways with a lot of different philosophies. I think what I've enjoyed most is providing some type of hierarchy where there's, you know, a leadership component, but then there's also just a microcosm of the athletic department where you have student athletes that are on your team that are in charge of the community outreach for your team, or that are the liaisons for your marketing reps, and just like empowering these young people to have a voice and an opinion, but also to help them advocate, find their voice, and figure out how to work together on behalf of the greater good, right? Like it's bigger than their sport. Sometimes it's bigger than themselves. So, you know, I like the concept of having team captains within a team in order to communicate within that team. But I also think that there's value in providing that leadership to branch out, and then giving some other people who may not fill particular roles within your team based on your hierarchy or based on how you establish your team captains, an opportunity to still have like a leadership or a delegation role for your team on behalf of your team within the department, within the community, whatever that might look like. I think there's just a ton of value in providing people different avenues based on their strengths to figure out how to lead and to figure out how to work with others on behalf of, right? So there's a lot of value in those pieces. So I've seen that be really fruitful, not one that I see all the time, but a model that I think has helped young people kind of see beyond and then understand that they're a piece of the whole, which trickles down into not only, you know, them being a member of your team, but also just a member of the athletic department and an ambassador for the university. So probably a boring answer for some of you, but one that I've seen that's been helpful from my lens.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Chrissy.
So I might be the anomaly on here because in the first 2 years we didn't have team captains, but this year my goal is to be able to have that. Year one, we were really kind of seeing where our leadership was. It was a team that was really grad heavy and senior heavy. And there were some leadership mechanisms in place from the previous staff. A lot of those upperclassmen would come in my office and say, hey, can we go to grab lunch? Can we talk through something? So I was in a more learning environment where I was really trying to learn my team, learn our leadership. This year, we will do a leadership council where we have a leader from every single class. We also have some leadership mechanisms in place through our university, similar to what Brandy was talking about from and being ambassadors of the university. We have a program here at GW called LEAP, and each class has multiple leaders that we select as head coaches to the university, and each of those classes has 2 representatives. So they're getting leadership training from a leadership academy within GW, and it's a privilege to be in this kind of selected group of ambassadors for the university. So we have had that in place the last 2 years, but this year as a group, we will look to select captains. I will say that it's something for me that I think being named a captain is something that I want them to really have, like that's the pinnacle from a leadership standpoint within our program, right? I see people that have the C on their shirt. Our goal is to have that. But I wanted to make sure I had a really deep understanding of our roster before I started assigning or having them select who captains would be. I felt like I really needed to learn our team, who people were, and have an understanding of our roster before I just said, hey, these are your leaders, because I needed to know who the voices in the locker room were, how people showed up every day before they were granted maybe a leadership position that they weren't ready for. We do have people in our program that are leaders of. We have a team impact where we work with Team Impact, which is a community service program. So we have a leader that's Team Impact. She's our Team Impact representative. So anytime we have a Team Impact announcement, she's the one giving that to our group. She's the one communicating with our community service. In the past, at different programs that I've been a part of, we've had like a travel captain, someone that's in charge of travel. So making sure people are in the right uniform, they're in the right time, they're in the bus on time. So really trying to delegate, this person leads travel, this person leads academics, this person is our food captain, which sounds really silly, but our team was really excited to be like, hey, these are the 5 places we love to eat. Can we make sure we get on one of these? So we would give them the green light to say, you're the food captain this weekend. Where are the places the team wants to eat? And if we can make that work, we can make that work. And so it's really trying to buy into their investment. But this will be the first year GW that we really assign we select captains, and I wanted to be really mindful before I just jumped in and did that year 1.
I think that's a great point, because I hear a lot of times that coaches aren't using a traditional captain structure. And I think we even heard some of the uniqueness that people are using, and being aware that the captain that you want to be the leader, you put the C on their chest as a coach, that might not be the leader in your locker room. And you need to know that too, because you're going to want to develop all the leaders, whether they're the ones that you think should be or not, right? Leaders are leaders because they have followers. And it's just that simple. So interesting take. Samantha, anything to add on leaders and captains?
I love all the ideas and the diversity of these ideas. I think it's about finding the structure that fits your program. I think my only piece of advice from what has gotten coaches in trouble before is if the players have either no say or perceive that they have no say in their leadership, which I think would be unusual, but I just encourage you to be very transparent and intentional with how you set up whatever selection or election process that you use. I certainly have heard the complaint before that the coach just picks the captains, and that has tended not to fly so well these days. So I just encourage, that player involvement, and you want that, because to your point, Joanna, you're a leader when you have followers. And so, that happens when you have, the trust and respect of your teammates. So that's all, but love the ideas.
Thank you. Brandy, I'm going to come back to you, and we'll just take one panelist after this, and we'll come back to some of these topics a little later if we want. For our collegiate coaches, and we have a mix, so we're going to get to high school too, but for our collegiate coaches right now, when they're trying to maybe start a relationship with a new sports supervisor, what do you think are some of the important things that coaches and sports supervisors need to talk about early and get on the same page with early?
So I think honesty is always really important. Transparency is important. Not all sport administrators are created the same. Not all head coaches are created the same. And I think as a head coach, number one, the first thing that you need to understand is the philosophy of your athletic director, and his or her goals for you and your program, and then understanding what they see as the role for your sport administrator. I'll speak for myself. So when I meet new coaches, so I've been at Penn State for 5.5 months, and I have new coaches that I have been working with. And so the first thing I do is just try to sit down with them, just to get to know them a little bit, get to know their program, the history of their program, why they chose to work at that institution. I share the same from my lens, why I chose to come to Penn State, why I, am looking forward to working with them. But we also just establish boundaries, right? So how can I help you? What do you need from me? And I want to be here to be supportive, but I'm not here to insert myself into your program. But I can't help you if you're not telling me what you need. And so there's got to be some level setting there in a relationship between you and your sport administrator. I also think that share with them what you want, share with them what some of your frustrations are or ways that they can help you, but there has to be a management of expectations on both ends that nobody has pixie dust. So I don't expect for my coaches to turn programs around in a year. And they have to also understand that sport administrators don't have unlimited budgets, and they're not the ones that are ultimately making decisions, but they are meant to advocate for them. And so what I try to tell sport administrators from our side of things on the administration side is, number one, you're meant to be an advocate for the sport program, but you're not meant to be a part of the staff. So you have to be able to have a balance of hearing and understanding needs and wants from the program, but then also understanding the bigger picture of the athletic department, and then negotiating the two of those things. So a coach understands what's realistic versus what's idealistic. I also, and this is I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes, but I'm also a sport administrator that like the boundaries are really important, that I never want to insert myself to a point where a coach can say that they've made decisions based on my influence. So I'm here to help provide some type of information or perspective. But if we were to make a change at the end of the year with any of our coaches, I would never want to be positioned in a way that a coach could say, well, I wasn't going to make those decisions, but if not for Brandy inserting herself, then I would have chosen something else. I've got to, you know, provide people with information, but then I have to evaluate them on how they make decisions and choices with their student athletes, with their program scheduling, all of those different things. So that's a delicate balance too. So it's like double dutch a little bit, right? Like I'm in for this. I want to be here. I want to help. But also like you have to make your own decisions, and I have to be able to see how you operate on your own and the decisions that you choose to make. I think that sport administrators should be present at practices, not all of them, but I think you have to come to some to understand the genesis of the philosophy of a coach, how they interact with their student athletes, how they interact with their coaches, is what they're teaching translating to these student athletes into competition, and is it resulting in favorable results? And then like, again, like what do they need? How can I help them be successful? What have they identified as areas that are really crucial to their program success? And then how can I help them? Coaches should coach. They shouldn't have to be administrators. So if you have issues with marketing, if you have issues with your StratCom person, with your academic person, give those to me as your sport administrator so I can handle those battles and I can advocate on behalf of, so that you can focus on coaching. I think too often coaches get like too deep into the weeds and focus on the wrong things. And then all of a sudden, like the micromanaging and support staff takes them away from actually coaching and being present for their student athletes. And sometimes it's easier to make that choice as a coach, which is understandable, but like, that's not your job. So let me help you. Tell me what you need and let me help you. So I really see the relationship between a sport administrator and a head coach as a partnership. But it's not a relationship, right? Like you're in it together for the same reason on behalf of the student athletes and behalf of the institution. And like, I'll go to war with you, but I'll also go to war with you if I need to. So we'll get down in the trenches together, but also like if we need to have some words, or if we need to have a come to Jesus on some decisions you're making or some things that are happening, we have to be able to have that ebb and flow too. So I think being transparent, also just being forthcoming and a little bit vulnerable is really important. There's got to be active listening on both sides of the table. And then like the roles and the boundaries should be established on what you need from your sport administrator, what your sport administrator needs from you in order for you to be successful. But there should be some balance there. I hope that answered the question. I feel like I ran.
Thank you. One more before I get you out of here.
I have a few more minutes. He's finishing his snack. So
all right, Parker. Perfect. Well, let's go ahead. Mickey, you've had a lot of different administrators, a lot of different institutions. Coach Dean started as a high school coach. We're going to get into that a little bit too. But what are some of the things that you think have been really beneficial, Mickey, that you've done when you've had the best relationship with a sport administrator?
I think Brandy did an awesome job of explaining what I call, being on the same page, but the separation of duties and understanding. Right from the beginning, she talked about being honest and truthful right up front with each other about what you see and so forth, because you really can't move forward unless you get to that point. And then, for me, you go from high school to junior college to small D1, and you're used to doing everything yourself. So you're doing it all. Now all of a sudden you move up to, let's say, a mid-major or high mid-major, and now you've got this sport administrator who you didn't even know who it was at possibly a junior college or a small D1. You didn't even know who your sport administrator was. You just did your thing. Now all of a sudden you've got this person in the room and they're giving you input. And you're like, I don't need your input. I've been doing this. So you have to figure that out as a young coach as you're moving up through it. And then, of course, you get to the SEC and there's a whole lot more input and the job gets much bigger. And so you really have to trust and rely on your staff. And when I say staff, I'm talking about extended staff. I'm talking about your sport administrator, your director of ops, a lot of the things that you used to do and you used to have hands on and you're used to having control over those things. Now, all of a sudden, you've got to find a way to cut the cord and allow them to do their job, because they're probably going to, in the end, do a much better job of those things than you will. You're just going to rant and scream and stomp your feet like a 5-year-old until it gets done, whereas they know the processes and they're going to get them done.
And if I could add just two more things. So one, I totally agree with you, Mickey. And most of the time, your sport administrator has insight from your AD that you might not have. So they're going to drop hints and like, hey, maybe you should consider this, or like, we need to watch your budget, things of that nature. Like, listen, because if they're doing it effectively, then they're really trying to lead you to where you need to go.
I've had plenty of hints.
Yeah, yeah, pick up the crumbs. But something else that I would say to head coaches that I say, I don't necessarily say this to head coaches, but I do say this to sport administrators, is like, also be cognizant and ask your coach directly, like, about your physical proximity to the team. I see some sport administrators that are in the dugout, that are on the field next to the bench. And like, if you're not going to be there every day, all the time, then I feel some type of way about that. Like, I'm not messing up juju. I hate going on road trips only because I'm like, whose seat am I taking? You know, whose rhythm am I messing up right now? Because everybody's got their assigned stuff. So like, we have to be cognizant of that. And like, I also am not a fan of the sport administrators that like take kids to coffee or do some of those things. I think that like blurs lines sometimes. And again, for us, we're here to advocate. So if a kid comes to me and says, hey, I want to talk to you, can I talk to you about something? 100%. But like, that's the intimacy line that I think is really important, that coaches don't, that sport administrators don't cross with student athletes or staff. So what I would say to coaches is like, if that is something that you know is not a vibe for you, be honest and tell somebody up front, because if you don't, then it's just going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be awkward. And that is okay if that is not your jam. Like, that's okay to say to somebody, hey, I mean, so happy that you're here with us, but if you could sit in the stands, or if you could whatever, like, we're just trying to keep our routines together. That's fair too. And I just think people need to be cognizant of that. We're not there to hold up trophies. We're not there to, hit ground balls for people and like, we're not a coach, we're administrators. And so we do have to be able to manage that, but there's no shame in you managing up in that way either, because that's important for you too. You don't need to be nervous, paranoid, or uncomfortable as you're coaching, because that's going to impact the culture of your team and how you approach the people within your program too. So I just want to acknowledge that's okay to not be okay with that.
Thank you, Brandy. Appreciate it. I think Samantha had something as well. Sam, what do you have?
Yeah, I want in on this. Sport administrators are our coach's lifeline. And I think we could do a whole segment just on this. And I would listen to Brandy talk and lead that the whole time, because I think she has some really great ideas. Totally agree with Mickey about being on the same page. So why I want in is, what can go wrong? What have I seen go wrong? And I think the one piece of advice to start the year and set the tone is that it seems almost inevitable that student athletes will go to a sport administrator with complaints, right? It just, it's happening. It's happening a lot. And I think what's important in terms of the transparency and the relationship between a coach and their sport administrator is that line of communication is open, because a coach can't fix what they don't know, and so the sport administrator being able to take a complaint or concern and bring it to the coach, or bring the student athlete to the coach, or encourage that, that direct conversation is really important. And there seems to be an aversion with some sport administrators, is thinking like, well, we don't want the coach to retaliate, or we want a safe space for the athletes or whatnot. But I've seen that really go awry, really undermine and erode some of the trust and relationships between student athletes and their coaches. And so that's where I think the sport administrator can play an important role. To Brandy's point, what is the role? It is there to be a support and a facilitator. But I would talk right up front, at the beginning of the year, especially if you have a new sport administrator, about how complaints are going to be handled, and encouraging that communication so that you can address it. Give the coach a chance to understand, is there a problem? What's the problem? What can we do to fix it? But that, I think, out of the gate, really important.
Thank you, Samantha. Appreciate that. And one thing, as you were talking, I remember a call that we were on with a brand new head coach, and she mentioned that she had been hearing all the time, talk to your sport administrator. And so she had brought every little miniature problem to the sport administrator because she thought she was doing the right thing. And at the end of the year, the sport administrator had said, I don't know if I have a lot of confidence, or it seems like there's, a lot of problems. And so just curious on your take, and we'll go with Brandy, and then Chrissy, well, if you chime in on this too, what goes to the sport administrator and what doesn't?
Yeah, so I think some of that really depends on the relationship that you have with your sport administrator and the culture of your program. So I've had coaches that have been like, oh, this is so nitpicky, but like, I just want to get your take on this. This is what I'm thinking. Like, my opinion is come with solutions or come with some ideas that you're just bouncing off. And then it's a collaborative opportunity, right? Like, if you set the stage of like, I'm coming to you because like, I just don't want to mess this up. Okay, great. Like, let's talk about this and then continue to move forward. And then we'll see how things work. I think I see that as being thoughtful. And I see that as being proactive. I've had some veteran coaches that have gotten burned. And so they have come to me with like, oh, and this happened and this happened. And then once they get more comfortable with me, and I get more comfortable with them, and they understand like, hey, listen, these are the things as a sport administrator I'm not worried about. Now, if it's a perpetual issue, then we'll have some discussions. But we're good. Like, don't worry about that. I'm not tripping. I'm not judging you on that. And so like, there's the relationship and the conversation that you can have in order to figure out what that might look like. Because again, not every sport administrator is the same. Not every head coach is the same. So you all need to figure out what that cadence looks like for you. But I do think a lot of it comes down to trust. This is a very litigious era that we are in. And so there's some level setting with the student athletes too, right? Of understanding, hey, every complaint, like, you're not going to get your coach fired. That's not what we're doing here. So be constructive with whatever it is that you're going to come to me with. And I'm also going to ask you what role you're playing in some of this stuff too, right? But that's another reason why I would always suggest to coach or to to sport administrators, go to practice, like pop in on practice. Just be available. Sometimes like just show up and you don't have to be seen. It's not like you're peeping, but like just sit up in the stands or whatever and just watch interactions. Because sometimes you have student athletes that will come forward and have a complaint. And it's like, okay, well, I've kind of seen that. And then you just weigh as a student athlete how you manage that conversation and negotiate that conversation. But I think coaches have to feel comfortable. So I would say if I had a coach that came to me a lot, then I would have to be curious and not judgmental first, to be like, this little Ted Lasso for y'all. I would have to ask like, okay, so talk to me about why you're so paranoid. Where is this coming from? Because I need to help you as a sport administrator not worry about the little things. But you also need to be able to manage your program. But that's part of my job, is to help you manage your program. If we are both at the same institution and you are our head coach, it's my job to help you be the best version of yourself that you can be. Now I can evaluate you overall, but I'm not going to sit back and be like, they asked so many questions, I don't even know what to do. Well, that's part of my job, is to help you understand which questions are the ones that we need to talk about, some that you just want to bounce off of me, but that's part of the reason that I'm there. That's part of my role. So if you have a sport administrator that feels that way, then I would ask them some questions in terms of their perspective and their perception so that you all can find a way to get on the same page.
Thank you, Brandy. Chrissy, let's go to you. Kind of what you did to navigate that early, and then Leslie, we'll make sure you get in here too. Any thoughts you have on the whole conversation? Go ahead, Chrissy.
Yeah, so I'm in a unique situation because I have a great relationship with my sport oversight, and I'm now transitioning to a new sport oversight, and we actually just met yesterday, so I think I have a little bit of context there. One of the things that has been really helpful is we have bi-monthly one-on-ones, and we've got a sheet where we just like touch base development, student athlete experience, where are we on travel schedule. So if anything's changed in any of those areas, we just touch base upon any of those. So my sport oversight is kind of constantly aware of like 15 big areas that she's identified for our program. If we have an injury, if we have a big recruit, if we have something going on, she's aware of those things. And it's just to touch base so that there's nothing that really surprises our sport administrator. If I were to call and say, hey, this happened, it wasn't like I just put it on her plate when it got bad. She's maybe has known something every 2 weeks, right? We've had an update, whether it's on facilities or anything like that. That's been a really helpful system for us. I do believe so much of what we do with sport administrators, it's about relationships and trust. One thing that I thought has been really nice here at GW is we alternate where those meetings take place. So sometimes it's me at her office, and then the next time it's my sport oversight at my office. So it's not like I'm constantly going into the administrator's seat, sitting across their desk. Like they're seeing me in our environment, in our office, and kind of how the flow of our day is. And I think when you kind of go to their space, like Brandy's saying, going to a practice or going to see your coach at a facility, that's been something that's been a helpful mechanism in our sport administrator relationships. I just met with our new sport administrator yesterday because we had some stuff going on in her field, and I wanted to talk through like, hey, let's lay the groundwork for the year. I want you to see where we are. Like, I want you to meet our team. And I thought it was really nice because we were out at our field walking around, and then we went to a soccer game and we were just chatting, and it didn't feel super like formal of like behind a desk. It was just a conversation. And I asked, how do you want this to go? What do you want me to come to you with? And I think laying those questions early in our sport administrator to head coach relationship is going to be really important. And he's like, well, I don't want you to come to me if you're seeing red, right? I do, but I want to know before it gets to the red to know how I can help. And similar to what Brandy said, he's like, if you have something that comes up with marketing or facilities or anything, come to me and I'm going to handle that. I'll be the person that's your liaison to that, because I want you to focus on your team, on student athlete experience, on those things. And I think that's something that as a head coach at any place, you're always trying to learn, like, how do I move this forward? How do I move the needle forward in certain areas? But I thought for me, straight up asking the question of how do you want this relationship to go? What do you want me to come to you with? When is it too much? When is it not enough? And he's like, the moment you think, hey, something's bugging you or there's a problem, let me know so I can get in front of it and I can help maybe bridge that gap with that department. So it's not you always holding people accountable. He wants to help me hold departments accountable, but he wants to help me manage those relationships with support staff, which I think is really helpful. And then something we discussed was really being solution oriented. I think as a head coach, we do that often. I think as coaches in general, we talk to our teams about solving problems and being really great at being great solution finders. So I think showing that you've tried to solve a problem before you brought a problem to maybe the higher problem solver, I think is really important. So being solution oriented or proposing a potential solution. What do you think? Are you comfortable with this solution? Are you comfortable with I did that? If it's something that maybe you need some more guidance for, but really being a solution finder. And I think just having a really great and honest relationship, it all starts with trust. The more your sport administrator knows you, the better, the more you can maybe call them when something gets hard, or, you know, they trust you because they know you. I invite anybody in our program and our support staff and administrators to our practice because I say it, I mean it. I have nothing to hide. Come watch us practice, come see how we operate our program. And I think if you can see that on a daily basis, you understand what we're about and who we are. And the last thing I would say is I was kind of chuckling when Brandy was talking about, you know, different people being in your dugout on game day. I'm a creature of habit and I thrive in routines, right? I thrived in routine as a student athlete. I thrive in routines as a head coach. I want to sit down and write my lineup the same way. We're going to take pregame the same way. So for me, I really noticed it when we started to get into championship play in the Atlantic 10 tournament and then the championship game, because there's more eyes on you, which is awesome because you're in big moments. And then there's also more administrators and more support staff rolling through your dugout. And so you're in your biggest games of the year and stuff starts to feel different. And for a team and for coaches who thrive on routine, and just the normalcy of it, we talk a lot about champions adjust, right? We adjust to different circumstances, but the more we can control and keep those circumstances the same, this is just another day. We're going to play the same game we've been playing all year. I think the more you can kind of reiterate that to your staff, like this doesn't need to change. And the more that support staff can understand that, the better your athletes are just to feel that this is just another game, even though it might be the biggest game of the year. But the last thing you want as a head coach, and I can say that from experience, is for that game to feel completely different, because you don't want that. You already feel the nerves inside. You don't need all the other things going around. So I love that you touched on that, and I laughed because I've been there and that's real.
Hutch has a great story about a sport administrator wanting a seat on a charter to the World Series who she hadn't seen all year long, and the conversation she had with that only Hutch could probably have. And it's great. If you ever want to hear that story, you run into her at convention or something, ask her. It's fantastic. One thing that Chrissy said that I think is worth noting, and I'm just a research nerd, but when you have a conversation while you're walking, it completely changes the dynamic of the conversation. So I love that you did that. Walk the field, walk to a soccer game. There's just so much research on side to side communication and how it changes. I'm a nerd like that, but it can be really good for your relationships. Lastly, I know you haven't been in on this one. Anything you want to add with administrators, sports supervisors, relationships?
I don't really have much to add, just because we're going through a really major transition in our athletic department. We just hired a new AD, and the leadership styles between our previous AD and our new AD are so drastically different that we're just trying to kind of figure things out. And I mean, I think I will say I'm very encouraged by the change and the transition. So but really, this is all very new territory. Even after almost 30 years, we're entering very new territory. So yeah, that's all I got on that one.
I don't want to drag us out too long, but can I add something?
Of course, Coach, go for it.
Have the conversation with your sport administrator early on. Whoever is going to be there for postseason needs to be there during the season. All right, because just like Chrissy was saying, athletes are a creature of habit, and all of a sudden you can't get to your conference tournament or in the postseason, and all of a sudden your whole dugout has changed dynamics. If they're going to be there in postseason, you tell them they better be there during the regular season at some point, and they better be coming to practice. Otherwise, they're not going to be in your dugout come postseason. And I have had people that I've even here at Auburn, who they put on their little list at the end of the year that they're going to be in our dugout. And I'm like, no, you're not. So yeah, don't be shy about that.
Thank you, Coach. I know, Brandy, you said one more question and we had a lot of comments. Is there anything you want to touch on that you think is important from your perspective for setting the tone of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you enough. So like my first stint at being a sport administrator, I think I was like 26, 27, and I was a sport administrator for one of what became our national championship women's soccer program at Florida State. And the grace that was provided to me by our head coach, between him and our head women's volleyball coach, and helping me help myself to help them. So if you are somebody who's a more seasoned coach and you kind of know what you want and what you need, and you have a sport administrator, whether they're new to your program or new to the sport administration role, like there's nothing wrong with managing up. And again, I think a lot of that just comes from building relationships and building rapport and having some moments for vulnerability between you all. So, you know, what I would say is utilize your sport administrator as much as you can. Have them help you at the beginning of the year. Let them see your team rules. Let them understand the roles that your assistants play in your program. Share all of the things that you can up front so that they have a really good understanding of your program, and that they can just give you some feedback that might be beneficial for you. But I would also say, like, times have changed. People have changed, student athletes have changed, some coaches have changed, some haven't. And what I try to tell people, I'm probably on the cusp of the old school and new school. What I try to tell coaches, and when I was at Texas Tech, we had a few coaches that were struggling with, well, I can't be hard on my kids or hold them accountable because then I'm going to get fired. And that's not the case. And so as a sport administrator, I always try to encourage our coaches, like, I want to know what your accountability measures are. What does that look like? How do you hold your kids accountable? How do you hold yourself accountable? How do you hold your coaches accountable? Because that has to be embedded in your program, but so does relationship building with these kids. And so, lean on the people around you to help you maximize the resources that you have, the kids that you're serving, the coaches that you have on your staff. You have people who want to see you win. And if you don't, and you don't feel like you do, then those are conversations that you need to have with your athletic director. But like, all of these relationships are really important to the success of your program. So if you feel like you're struggling with either your student athletes or an administrator or people in the department, you have to say something. What I find more often than not is coaches that find themselves in trouble try to do everything on their own. And that's like a recipe for disaster, because you can't do it all on your own and you don't know where the minefields are. So use the people around you, build really authentic relationships with your student athletes, your coaches, your sport administrator, other folks. But also, you've got to understand, like, what's the end game for your AD? What is the end game for your athletic director for your program? And when you understand that, and then you reconcile that against the resources that you've been provided, then, you determine that gap and figure out how you're going to close the gap. But you've got to communicate, you've got to be open, and you've got to be willing to just be honest. People aren't, just like you do with your student athletes and your coaching staff, I would assume. You may say things that they don't want to hear, but they need to be said in order for things to be established. And that's no different with your sport administrator. So ask questions, ask for help, but also communicate your needs, communicate what's going to work for you in order to be successful, and then, go coach. You shouldn't be the coach, the administrator, the mental health clinician, the athletic trainer, unless you're at an institution where you have to be all those things. And then I understand. But if you have the resources, utilize them so that you can focus on the things that you were hired to do. And you can focus on these kids that you are stewarding and giving them the best experience that they can have. Obviously, winning matters, but them winning in life and feeling like you cared about their experience is above anything else that any of us can do. So I think those are my pennies. Thank you all. Joanna has my information. If like, I'm always willing to chat or to help however I can. So if you ever want to reach out, you're more than welcome to do so. I'd be happy to chat with you or to help, however I can help. Thanks, Joanna.
Thank you, Brandy. Appreciate your time. And thank you, everyone. We usually jump around a lot more. We're going to jump around now, but I wanted to make sure we hit all those things. Have a great night, Brandy.
You too.
But one of the things that has come up a lot on the question list are things like culture and standards and buy-in. And so I'm just going to go around with our coaches. Leslie, let's come to you first. When you hear those words, how do you get kids to buy in? How do you set a standard? How do you make sure that you are, on the same page with behavior and rules? What are the things that you think of that determines if your team is good at that in any given year?
Oh, there's a lot to unpack here. Oh boy, where do I start? Well, I think the first word that comes to my mind is consistency. If you're going to develop standards and, what we have done is several years ago, we just had a classroom session with our team. And I said, okay, it is time to formalize this. Like, we need to know, what is the mission of our program? What is the vision of our program? What are our core values? And everything that we do, once we establish that, we are going to build around that. And our players, we broke them into small groups in a classroom. And I said, okay, here's the definition of what a mission is. Here's what the definition of this is. Here's what we want to think about. We brainstormed like crazy on core values. And we really wanted those core values. Our mascot is Blue Golds without an E, BLUGOLDS. And we really wanted a set of core values that fit Blue Golds. And so we brainstormed the crap out of core values, and we're able to come to some conclusions on what those core values would be that fit Blue Golds. And then our players developed a mission statement, and they did it. And that was the coolest thing to be a part of, because it became about our program and about our team. And they did such a good job of it that it has just, like, that's what we are now, you know. Our mission is honor the past, play in the present, and prepare for the future. And we have that set of core values, and there is rarely a conversation that I will have with a player that doesn't involve one or more of those core values, whether it's a conversation about, you know, like maybe they didn't meet a standard. And so what core value applies in that circumstance? And I think one of the biggest compliments that I could have gotten about that was, you know, I had a senior last year who sat in my office, and she talked about being a senior. And she said, Coach, those core values are things that I'm going to take with me. She said, because they're not just a list of words on the back of our dugout. They've become a part of who I am. And you can't ask for anything more from a player than that. And so, but it just takes consistency. And I think the other thing is, it takes patience and it takes time. It's not something where you can just sit down in a classroom and come up with a mission, a vision, and core values, and then tomorrow everybody is bought in. And then once you have those things established, it's just, we would spend time in practice every single day. We would assign a core value to a player, and she would have to come to practice every single day and talk about that core value and what it meant to her. And it was just that steady drip of reminding them of what the standards were, what the core values were, what the mission was, what they're a part of, just continual work at that, to where it just becomes a part of their daily language. But I think the buy-in piece, having the team do this and them understanding that they were the ones that decided these things, that's a huge way to get that buy-in. So those are some of the things that we have done. And again, I think it's just consistency. And then as a coach, if your team is going to have that mission, that vision, those core principles, then, you know, as a coach, we have to live by the same things. We have to model the behavior. So I guess that's, you know, consistency and being patient with the process.
Great stuff, Leslie. Thank you. And I think Samantha's probably like honking her horn and ready to just jump in on this, because I know she loves the player buy-in piece that you outlined so well. Sam, anything that you want to add on that? I know that's your thing.
Love it. Love it. No, I'll wait until team rules and expectations, but love all that she said.
Perfect. Mickey, a little bit different questions on the Reg form about, what do you do to set the tone after a great year when you've just had a, you know, championship and you want to keep it going? And then, you know, 2 lines later, what do I do to set the tone when we've had such a down year and we need to balance some optimism? Does it change for you year to year based on how the previous year played out and why?
Gosh, it really depends on your returning juniors and seniors. So you have to decide as a coach and as a staff and as a team, who do you want after a good year? It's easy. you know, you turn it over to those upperclassmen and let them drive the car. After a bad year, you've got to sit back and say, all right, who do you want to drive this car? Because we don't like the direction it just went in this past year. And so we want to make sure that we're going in the right direction. And I love listening to Coach Huntington talk about the Brian Kane, because we've been doing that for a long time. And so either way, whether it's off a bad year or off a good year, at some point, your juniors and seniors are going to have to be the ones driving that bus in order for that year to be a successful one. Sometimes it could be such a bad year that you're like, all right, I got to get things back on course. But 2 years from now is really when our window is going to be. So now you've got to reach down to those freshmen and sophomore and look for some leadership there. So, you know, it can be easy or it can be really difficult. And I wish I had a straightforward, this is ABC, this is how you do it. But it really doesn't work that way. You have to really know the dynamics of your team.
You know, Chrissy, for you, this is probably, you know, happening a lot, right? Because you're still getting to know some of the dynamics and working on that constant drip. What are some of the culture things that you're doing right now or that you have found to be beneficial?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about culture in our program. I think there's 3 things that first and foremost help you succeed, and it's culture, it's your player development, it's your recruiting, and everything else falls secondary to that, right? Marketing, those types of things are all really important. But the 3 areas that we focus on the most are culture, recruiting, and player development. We are in the first week of school. We're actually in a heat wave right now. So we've had 2 cancellations of practices, day 1 and day 2. So we did a team building exercise today. I did this year 1 and our team really loved it. If you haven't already read it, I have it on my desk. It's The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. It's a wonderful book. I highly recommend it to anybody. It's one of my favorite books of all time. But in the book, there's a study that was done by Cal Berkeley, and it's on connection and connectivity in teams. And, you know, what's the great separator of 2 really great teams? A lot of times it's the connectivity of the team. So we did an exercise today, and there's a study and there's a list of questions, and there's like tier 1 questions, tier 2, and tier 3. So tier 1 questions are, you know, if you could have a dinner guest, who would it be? And learning that from our team, right? Who's your favorite musician? If you could go to a concert today, who would it be? So then when that song comes on in practice, right, it's Taylor Swift or Bailey Zimmerman or whoever they're talking about, you know, our team's like, oh my gosh, this is Maggie's song, or oh, this is so-and-so song. And while they may seem like small little moments, they're moments of connectivity between the group. And if we can build those moments in the group outside of softball, they then help us when we are on the field because they're small moments of trust. And the second tier questions might be, what's like the greatest achievement in your life? What's the goal you want to achieve? What's your hardest moment? I'm not saying to get into emotions and all of those things really deep. It's like peeling an onion back, but there's tier 1, there's tier 2, and there's tier 3 questions. And it comes from a direct study at Cal Berkeley. It's a really good thing. You can Google Cal Berkeley study on connectivity of teams, and you'll get the list of questions. We then kind of pivoted and created one today, and it was because some kids had walked into my office and they're like, we have a new couch. And they're like, we feel like we're in the principal's office. And I said, well, have you ever been to the principal's office? And they're like, one of them said, yeah. And so she started sharing the story from 3rd grade, which was hilarious. So then we asked our team that question, and it was a really good bonding moment for a group of what this person did in 3rd grade, of what this person did in kindergarten or whatever. And the laughs that our group had, I think are things that we can build off, because we have 13 underclassmen, we have 8 newcomers. So we're constantly trying to build connectivity and culture. And then we drip that every single day. We start every single practice with the core value. They wait for it. They're like, Coach, what's the thought of the day? And I spend a lot of time in that, whether it's a parable or a lesson or some type of thing on one of our core values of our group. Because I think that it's not just a one-time thing, it's an all the time thing. Culture resonates through every part of your program. It resonates with how you speak to your team, with how you set a tone of practice, with how they speak to another. We started off our first team meeting when we talked about culture. We talked about what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it act like? And we shared those things. This is what it looks like to be a part of a winning culture. This is what it feels like. This is what it doesn't feel like. This is what if somebody came into our practice, what we want them to feel like. And I think when you can have those conversations with your group and they can identify the behaviors of what a really strong culture is and what a really strong culture is not, then they can start to hold themselves to those standards. But the culture exercise of the belonging and connectivity with a team, I would tell you, may seem like silly and superficial at first, but the things that come out of it are really quite powerful. And I would encourage you to do that with your team, especially when you're trying to get to know people. And we did it where every student athlete answered the same question. And then it was the next question. We did like 5 or 6 questions today. We got through it in about 45 minutes. And it was really good team bonding. And then we went to the weight room and we were running and doing our workouts, and they were talking about the connection points within that. So highly recommend. It was just a really good starting point for our group.
Thank you, Coach. And as always, Dave crushes the chat. He's got the link in there already for the book if you want to get in there. But this is also a great time to put whatever book your team is reading or you are most interested in reading or that made its way onto your book list. We can get really quick, in-depth book lists if you just throw that in the chat. So if there's something you're reading, get that in there. Samantha, you mentioned some team rules. How do you think those team rules and discipline things fit into culture?
Well, I think that your team rules, expectations, standards, guidelines, whatever you call them, really provide a framework of expectations, right? Of what is expected, which I think is embedded in all of this conversation about culture. But it does get into the nitty-gritty of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And I think to start the year and set the tone, many of you have probably already had this conversation with your teams. I hope you have. If you have to revisit it based on things that we're talking about tonight, please do so. It's not a one and done conversation. But here are a few key tips on setting your team rules and expectations. First, your team and player involvement. I think Leslie Huntington talked about it, about sitting down and what are the expectations. Chrissy talked about it as well. What's okay and what's not okay. Rhonda Ravel has developed recently in recent years a system of what's above the line, at the line, or below the line. I think as you're talking about those standards and expectations, or even if you want to still call them rules, you want to incorporate, and that's a really important word, incorporate all your school policies, right? So you don't have to define, hazing, harassment, bullying, all those things. You just point to the school rules, whether they're school or department rules or both, and say all of those apply, right? All of those apply to you as students, in this setting, but especially as student athletes in this program. To the extent that you want to go above and beyond that, go for it with your team. What is acceptable and what's not acceptable, and then what are potential consequences. I don't think you need to box yourself in and say, if you do this, then this will happen. No more running for punishment, no more physical punishments. I hope everybody is on board with that. That still kind of has, I hear about those moments and I wonder where people been, like, we can't do that anymore. Okay. So you need to think about what else, what are the consequences? How do we hold each other accountable? How do you hold student athletes accountable? I think this is also a conversation with your sport administrator. I think consequences can range from loss of practice time, sitting in practice, that matters, whether it's, finding a way to contribute back to a team that you feel like players breached trust. It could be a suspension, it could be a dismissal, all of those are an array of possibilities. And I think those have to be discussed. That's notice, right? If you break some of these expectations, this is what could happen. Lastly, and I feel like I'm the heavy hitter in this, so I hope that everybody's looking at my picture of the lake and the mountains and feel calm as we're talking about these things that are tough, but they're very important. All of you need to have a hazing conversation with your team this year. Every single one of you on this Zoom, if you're listening to it later, and not just a brush it over, no hazing. When something happens in athletics that gets national attention, like what has happened at Northwestern with the football program, it reverberates through athletic departments across the country. And so hazing is what has been a hot topic this summer. I think it's important to understand what hazing is and what it's not, to define it, to visit what I think there are 44 states that have, it's criminal to haze. I think understanding that hazing still exists. And, what was an interesting, study statistic was that, and I don't know the percentage right now because I'm driving, but it was a high percentage, that didn't even think they were being hazed when they were being hazed. Hazing is high in athletics on college campuses. It's higher than fraternities and sororities, and it's a problem. And coaches are being held accountable. And I think what was kind of alarming coming out of the Northwestern case was there was an investigation, and the coach, the investigation conclusions was that the coach didn't know, still lost his job because the administration said he should have known. So I think, where does it seep in our teams? It's quote unquote traditions. It's what we've always done. It's social gatherings, it's rituals. And I just want you all to hit that hard with your leaders. First and foremost, this is not okay. It's not acceptable. There'll be serious consequences if there's hazing going on. Then with your new students, your first years, or even your transfers, because sometimes they're included because they're new to the program. If you ever feel uncomfortable, know that we're here. We're here to listen. And then with the whole team, right? I think it has to be, that message has to be cascaded down. But this is a very relevant, hot topic issue that I think we have to, make sure that you are visiting with your teams, in a very serious and intentional way. Ultimately, it comes down to how we're treating each other, right? And I think that's what's concerning about hazing is it's the team and how they treat each other, right? But there are power dynamics, and there's conduct that seems like it's been okay, or everybody's doing it, and it's not. And we just have to get a handle on it and make sure that it is not in your program. So that is my hammer for the night. But otherwise, I think that team expectations can really help set a tone for the year, and in a positive way. Again, what conduct do we want to see? It doesn't always have to be prohibitions. So if you have any questions about hazing or team expectations, find my calendar, set up a time to talk, and I'm happy to talk one-on-one with any of you.
Don't you love when she just brings the flowers and sunshine out? It's always so nice. No, we love you, Sam. It's a great information to have. Remember, she is a member benefit. So while not everyone on this call is a member, if you are and want that information, you can find that in your coach's box. One thing that is on a few questions here that I'm getting are setting the tone for your staff. It's not just your student athletes, but assistant coaches and roles and responsibilities and those standards. So, Mickey, let's go to you, and then we'll go to Leslie next. How do you set the standard and the roles and the expectations with your assistant coaches to start the year?
Well, the nice thing about it is you really take care of that in the hiring process, and just helping them to understand that there's a certain level of professionalism. The younger the coach, you have to make sure that the social life is, they have to be careful there. That's where I see most young coaches get in trouble. But it's just having that level, that line there between friendship and coaching. One of the things we do, or a couple of things we do, is that our administration is involved in our rules, our team rules, and we have to have that approved by the administration and compliance. Our players are involved when we talk about team rules, and they read through them and they agree with them, or they, or we discuss them every year. And then, our coaches sign in their contract a level of professionalism, and our coaches understand that, we never meet with the player one-on-one behind closed doors. Whenever there's a meeting with a player, there's always two coaches that have to be involved, or a coach and administrator, because you never want to get into the he said, she said. You want to, the best way I can put it to you is document, document, document. whenever you have a discussion with a player or a parent, administrator, a coach, because I've had to have, meetings with coaches in the past just about the way that they may discuss something with the player. So it's not an easy subject sometimes, but it's one where I think we do a good job here at Auburn of in the beginning of the year of discussing those things and being able to look at them from a legal standpoint in our employment contracts. So I don't know how well I answered your question, but I did my best. And I did remember to cut my mute on, so.
You're winning the day, Mickey. You're winning the day. No, that's really important, and I'm glad you touched on the helping younger assistants. It's hard. It's hard, and they find themselves in that role. Sometimes it's a head coach. You find yourself in that role. I was a head coach at 23, and it's really hard. And we any of you that are new head coaches at the collegiate level, we have a group that meets monthly for that. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, check your email or let me know. We're working on something for the scholastic and travel level as well. It's just not ready yet, but it is a tough job for sure. Leslie, what would you add or put in when it comes to setting the tone with your staff?
Well, I mean, for me, I'm in a really fortunate situation. Two of my assistant coaches are alumni of our program. So they understood the standards and the expectations as student athletes. And it's been relatively easy to just carry that over into their roles on the coaching staff. And then my other assistant coach has been with me for 23 years. And so and she's also an administrator. She's our SWA and associate athletic director in our department. So I've been very fortunate, but one thing that we have done on a pretty consistent basis is, toward the end of the summer, we just we call it a coaching staff retreat, and it's in the evening, 3, 4, 5 hours, whatever we think it's going to take. And I have the coaching staff over to my house, and we have some dinner, and we kind of go through what we're going to do during the fall. And we talk about expectations. We talk about, just reminders of, our job is to make them better, and we're not going to make them better if we are enabling them. And again, it kind of goes back to what I talked about earlier, just with our overall team culture and our core values. So those are just things that we talk about as a coaching staff, and the importance of modeling the behavior. And I think our coaching staff does a really good job of that. But again, communication is the key really to all of this, right? And as a head coach, it's my responsibility to make sure that the assistant coaching staff is doing the things that they need to do. So if I happen to notice in practice that, they're enabling a player, they're not holding them to the standard, then it's my job to pull them aside and explain, that we need to be better. And those aren't always the easiest conversations to have, but they're necessary because, and again, my young assistant is on this call, and she asked me a lot of questions, coach, what do I do here? What do I do here? And I say, because her goal is to be a head coach. And so what I've started doing is answering her questions with questions. And I've just said, if the success and or failure of this program were solely to fall on your shoulders right now, what decision would you make? And so now she started coming to me with solutions. So she's making great progress, but communication is the key, and just being very honest and open with the staff.
The Socratic method to get you every time. You got to watch those people. They're tricky. All right. I've got some questions left. I know we're running short on time, so we're going to try to turn this into a little bit of quick hits. All right. I'm going to give each of you 2 questions, but the rule is you have less than a minute to answer. All right. So you got to get in on this. So Chrissy, you're going to get the first one. What are your favorite drills for the first few practices? When it comes to setting the tone on the field, what do you think is most important first? Go.
Fundamentals. So we go over our everydays. We pour into fundamentals right from the start. There's a drill, I call it Candrea, and every single player in our roster does it, and it's half the teams at shortstop, half the teams at second base, and they get slow rollers. They're working glove flips, they're working backhands and forces. Every throw goes to second base, and then once they've made the play at short, they alternate to second base. I took it from a drill that Mike Candrea did with the Olympic team in 1996, so I give him credit as why I call it Candrea. But it's straight on, throws to second, and then they rotate to second base, and then they're the receiver. Forehands, flips, backhands, force throws, on the run hoppers on the run, and then the little no daylight ball. But it's a drill that I think shows their athleticism. It's really good. They get every single touch on the ball, and it's my hands down favorite drill. So we do Candrea right from the start. And I'm happy to share that and probably share a video of it to anybody that didn't make sense to.
I'm just gonna say, Chrissy doesn't know this yet, but she's gonna take a video of that and send it to us, and that will be a future Tip Tuesday. So
Give me like 2 weeks to let us get it
thank
right.
you, Chrissy, I appreciate that. October 1st, that's your due date. October 1st. Mickey, I'm gonna be graceful here and give you some length of time, but can you talk about all the things that have been mentioned today? What is most applicable when you think about your time as a high school coach? Oftentimes we think it's so different, collegiate and high school, but you've done both really well. What of these things do you think high school coaches can put into motion that will work for them?
Well, I think what changes is resources. I mean, the game, yes, it's faster, but the biggest thing is just communication and having a vision. Having a vision as a coach of what you want to do with the program and where you see the program going and the direction you want to see that program going in. And so you basically become a salesperson. You sell that vision, because high school, you got what you got. So now, how do I get the best volleyball players and the best basketball players and so forth to play softball? And so you have to have a vision that you really want to sell, and then you have to communicate that to your parents. I think one of the quickest ways that I was able to get our softball program to develop in high school and grow was spending a great deal of time in the Little League and the AAU softball programs in our community. And just getting them excited about that. Am I answering the question?
You did. Thank you.
All right.
Oh, all right, Leslie. How do you set the tone with parents? What should you be doing there? I should probably give you more than a minute too.
I think communication. Just communication. We happen to use an app. We use it for our team. It's called Band. If anybody, if people aren't familiar with it, we've used it for several years. It works really well for a lot of things. It's free. And I have a group in there that is parents and just, fans and supporters. And then I have our team in there as another group. And so I just I just communicate. I mean, I talked to them I sent them as soon as we finished our spring schedule, I sent it to them. And over the years, I anticipate what questions are going to come from that first communication. So I knew that once I sent out, here are the dates that we're going to play when we're on our spring break trip, and these are going to be our off days. I knew that if I didn't get on top of it, I was going to immediately get the question, Coach, do you know which day is going to be family day and which day is going to be team day of your 2 off days in Florida? And so I just said, please don't ask which day is going to be family day and which day is going to be team day, because I just now made this decision. I have not had time to think about that yet. But I think that I've actually developed a lot better relationships with our parents over the past several years that I've taken that approach and over communicating with the parents. I'm older school. And so it's not that I necessarily think, or in my core think, that I should have to do that type of communicating with parents, but I also am trying to change with the way things change and evolve. And I know that, I just think that the parents really appreciate that communication and that transparency. And again, it's just, I'm pretty direct and I don't have anything to hide. And I just want the parents to know that and see that and feel that and hear that as well. So I'm just an open book when it comes to the parents. And I think that has served us very well.
Thank you very much. All right, we will do some closing thoughts. So no real question, but just a quick hit of piece of advice you would give or anything else you want to share. And Mickey, if memory serves, wasn't Megan Good a pretty good volleyball player? Didn't you steal her right off a volleyball court somewhere?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I surprised her mom. I can still see her mom's face when she said, I'm going to come here and play softball for him. And her mom was like, what?
I love it. All right, Chrissy, lead us off. What do you have? Piece of advice. One more thing.
I got this as a young assistant, and I would, from a ton of people, be authentic, lead the way that you are. It's no use for me to try to act like someone else. I really try to stay true to myself. I'm a connector, I'm an educator, I bring high energy. And I think as leaders and as coaches, really trying to stay true to who you are is really important. And there's a world that's constantly trying to change you, but continuing to lead authentically, know why you're doing it, connect back to your why. Really, as a head coach, I really try to learn my assistant. So I would tell you that understanding your assistant, one of my assistants is on the call, Jordan, I see your face smiling at me through the camera. But understanding your assistant's ultimate dream, I ask them that in the interview process. I ask them that when they get here, because I want to understand how I can help lead my staff to their ultimate dream, how I can lead my team to their ultimate dream. And I think when you know what makes people tick and what their why is, then you can help them get there and you can help lead the whole group towards the goals that they're trying to achieve. But be yourself, understand the people that you're leading, and really pour into relationships.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Coach Huntington, let's have you go next. Piece of advice?
Yeah, Chrissy, I love what you said. I think early in my career, I was so ego driven, and it was all about comparing myself to other programs and other coaches, and just never feeling like I was good enough, and always feeling like I had something to prove. And I think the sooner that you can progress to a point where it is just about you and becoming the best version of you and not worrying about comparing yourself to others. And that's something as a mental performance coach that I work with clients on all the time is don't compare, just compete. Compete to be the best version of you every single day. And that's the message that I give to our players all the time. It's a message that I remind myself all the time. I've found much more inner peace since I've gotten to that place in my life. And I think it's really easy, as Chrissy said, to get wrapped up in a bunch of social media and all the garbage that's out there. And sometimes you just have to kind of push that to the side and just focus on what you see in the mirror and making that person the very best that you can be, and let the outcomes take care of themselves, because we can't control those.
I love it. That is great advice. Thank you, Coach. Mickey, your closing thoughts.
All right, I'm gonna go a little different direction here. Okay. I'm going to talk about staffs, hiring your staffs, because our staffs have started to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And even in high school, I look out there and they've got 5 or 6 people who are volunteering. So a couple pieces of advice is when you're putting your staff together. One, hire those that you trust. People that you trust. You'll figure out all the other stuff. Hire a staff that you trust. 2, hire people who want to become head coaches. Because if they want to become head coaches, then they're going to have that desire to do things right all the time, because they have that drive to be a head coach. So those are my advice. That's my advice as far as putting the staff together.
All right, we're gonna go to Samantha. If you know the status of Samantha's typical sign off, we're gonna play a little game. You can't cheat, Sam. Don't change your order. If you think she is going to lead with recruit well, you do the like party hat emoji. If you think she finish with recruit well, you can do the heart emoji. All right, we're gonna see who wins, but you can't change the order, Samantha. You gotta stick with your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm gonna lead. I'm gonna lead with my go-to. And it really kind of dovetails off of what Mickey says. I think who you bring into your program matters. And for Division I coaches out there, September 1 just happened. You know, y'all are in prime time recruiting. I think you need to recruit well. What does that mean? You need to find good matches to your style, to your school, to your location. That means you need to take your time. And I know once September 1 and the gates opened, you know, there just seems to be this flurry, but it matters. These decisions matter, every single one of them. The number of times I've had a coach who's, you know, hit a rough spot and they said it was a walk on, it was the last spot, or I thought it was okay. You know, every single person you bring into your program matters. But I do want to add some sunshine. You know, coaching, I think it's the best job in the world, right? And there's some energy that's so unique about the start of school. I just even had a conversation, I think, with another lawyer. I said, well, it's the start of the year. And they were like, well, it's September. I said, yeah, it's the start of the year because it's the start of the school year. And, you know, thrive off the energy. You have a new team. This is a new journey, whether you're, you know, whatever the scenario is, coming off of a tough season, coming off of a championship season, lots of new, you know, newcomers, grad heavy, whatever it is, embrace it, love it. You're making an impact, you know, with what you do every day. And I want you to feel, you know, strong and empowered and informed, and know that the NFCA is here for you with so many resources. And, you know, because you're on the Zoom. So this is just one of them. But convention is open. Get registered. You know, come to Louisville. You know, find my information in the coaches box, whatever. But you are not in this alone, and it is the best job in the world.
Thank you very much, everyone. Again, this is a forum, so this is available to any and all. If there's someone in your department at your school that you feel coaches a different sport would still benefit, please share it. It will be on our webpage by Friday. And we will also have a little link there to the books and other things that are available, the chat, once it's cleaned up, if you missed any of those things. We have more education coming up. If you're interested in this kind of content, then NFCC 401 is for you. That is a class that is held Monday through Friday, a call every day at noon, and we talk about all the non-X's and O's. All of those recordings are also available, so you can get nfca.org and hit the NFCC button, National Fast Pitch Coaches College, and learn all about that. That starts September 18th. And we have a bunch of education coming up in Louisville, as Samantha said. Hope to see everybody there. Thank you for joining us, spending your evening with us. If you need anything else, don't hesitate to reach out, and we will see you next time. Panelists, as always, you were awesome. Thank you so much. And if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. We're here for you all the time. Have a good night, everyone.